The voice of sharing, Durian ASEAN.
Hi, welcome back again by the ASEAN Breakfast Call. It's a show by the Durian ASEAN for the voice of discovery and sharing. And today we have our guest going to talk about the rising suicide rate, why people kill themselves. So Alex Lieh will be sharing with us on the topic itself. He's a lecturer at the he's a psychology lecturer at the Health University,
yeah.
and focusing on clinical and counseling. And welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi again, Arlene.
Yeah. So to start off with the topic today, I would like to just share one of the statistics that has been written recently in Malaysia. Is the suicide rate is on the rise globally as well as in Malaysia. In fact, according to the National Suicide Registry, there was an average of 2 suicides a day in 2011. So 2% would kill themselves a day in Malaysia for and on average. And in fact, recently a 21-year-old woman was found dead at the Center Point shopping mall here about 2 hours after she posted a suicide note on Facebook. So there seemed to be a worrying trend of people choosing to end their lives in today's modern society. What is your take on that? First of all, explain to us why the suicide rate is on the rise.
I think it's very interesting because I'm sure when you look at statistics, right, this is only based on those cases that have been reported as suicide. In fact, it is very, very possible that there are many deaths that has been reported that is actually suicide, but it's not labeled as suicide. I mean, let's say if I decide to drive a car and ram myself into another car or get myself killed, people won't know that it was actually a suicide. It could just look like a normal car accident. And I think the other thing about why people do not want to report suicide or put as the cause of death as suicide, because it's of the taboo. So some parents or
especially
say
among
family
our
members,
today's society,
yes,
right?
Especially among family members, even though they know it's suicide, but they will not say it's suicide. So it's recorded as an accident. And especially, I think for Muslims, it's a correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are actually found to have committed suicide, you will not be buried, in a normal, yeah. So there's a lot of this fear, and because of this, the statistics are actually way much lower than what it actually is. Yeah. So I mean, it's quite significant that they actually show a rise, and I think one of the main reasons why this could be so is, again, a lot to do with how people cope with stress. And obviously there are a lot of different stresses in our lives. And I think one of the things that we see lately is a rise not only suicide rate among adults but also among younger people. And most of the reason is because of academic pressure. I'm not sure whether you heard, but just recently there is this girl, a law student, I think, in Penang, who actually jumped off a building, because of exam pressure. So this could be one of the different factors that could cause suicide.
Just put a focus on young people today. In fact, in other countries as well, for example, in China, every year 500 young people from primary and secondary school combined would kill themselves because of exam pressure as well. So, I mean, in today's modern society, especially in a very capitalistic society, young people are forced to compete with each other, and they have to perform their best, and the stress is there. But why some people choose to end their life? Is that what they think that the way to go up in the social class is to be very good in your education, and that's it?
I think there are a few issues here. I think firstly is that if you look at the different countries around Asia, there are some countries that put a lot of emphasis on academic performance. Typically, countries like Japan, China, and even Malaysia included, especially in the urban areas where parents feel that the only way for their child to succeed is actually to get a string of A's, and anything less than an A is not acceptable, right? So in this sort of society, I mean, the pressure is a lot on those kids to actually perform. And then the other thing is also there's this concept of, parents is a very, very major influence. This family honor that they have to protect. If all my family members are doctors and lawyers, so it's totally unacceptable if I'm anything less than that. So there's this great pressure among children to want to please their parents, want to show that, I'm somebody in this family. And because of this, they feel that if, let's say, I don't achieve what my parents want me to achieve, then I'm unworthy. I'm not even worthy to be called your son or your daughter. Of course, they won't say, but, in their heart, that's what they actually feel. Yeah. And again, if you look at some of the other countries that's more holistic in their approach in education, you'll find that the suicide rate is actually much lower due to exam results. So places like China, it's very, very high. I think if you compare, like, probably the Philippines, it's almost... I've not heard of much cases like that.
They'll probably kill for other reasons.
Yeah, for other reasons, love or whatever. But no one will jump off a building just because I get one less an A in my exams.
So are you also comparing like different countries? Like, probably, would you agree that ASEAN countries would have more increased suicide rates compared to like Western countries?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, countries like France, almost, you almost unheard of for people committing suicide because of academic performance, or even Australia for that matter. Yeah, so it speaks a lot, So what are we trying to tell our kids nowadays? That is exams the only way to go? That there's nothing else in life if I don't do well? Yeah, So,
just wondering, like, usually when what is the symptom of people that has this tendency that would commit suicide?
This is a very difficult question to answer because, as you know, human beings, we are just so different. For different people, they have, they might not even show any signs. So it's very hard to, let's say, categorize and say, okay, if the person looks sad or cries all the time, then there's a higher tendency that they will commit suicide. But generally, there is one variable or factor that it's almost similar across the board. There is people who commit suicide feels that there is no more hope. They don't see that there's any way out of this, and because of that, therefore they feel that the only way that I can solve this problem is to just take away my life. Yeah, so there is no symptoms. There are some people who say, okay, if they suddenly feel happy, when they're sad, and suddenly they feel happy, and that's when they're going to commit. So yeah, it might be true for some people, but then again, it's not always true for everybody. Yeah, so it's really, really difficult for us to actually identify if this particular behavior would lead to suicide. Yeah.
But for family members or whoever it is that see their child or people that they know is having like deep depression, should they be worried if their kid or their loved one would commit suicide?
Yeah, actually depression is one of the main symptoms that would lead to suicide. But besides depression, there's also others, like for example, anxiety is also a leading factor. So people tend to associate depression with suicide, but they forgot that people who have very, very high levels of anxiety also have tendencies of attempting suicide as well. Yeah, so yes, we should be very, very worried if, let's say, there's a certain change in behavior in our loved ones. Like, for example, they used to love playing tennis or football, and all of a sudden they stop doing that. And that is one of those telltale signs of depression, and or maybe change in behavior patterns in terms of their sleep habits. They either can't sleep, or they sleep too much, or their eating behavior, or either they eat too much, or they don't have any appetite to eat. Cries all the time. They you sense that there's something different, right? Yeah. So again, when it comes back to exam stress and things like that, I think what we need to do is, as parents, as people around all those students, to actually is to be understanding, because at the end of the day, we have to realize that exam results is not everything. I mean, if you think about it, there are a lot of your friends who did worse than you before, but they are more successful than you now, right? So it's a mindset that we Asian parents especially need to change, and not put too much pressure on our kids, so much so that they think that if I don't do well in my exams, then life is not worth living anymore.
What are other approach of parenting that you think would be much more effective when it comes to trying to create the right mindset for young people?
I think firstly, there's this idea of unconditional positive regard, that we love our children no matter what, and we don't set conditions like, my level of love for you will only increase with the numbers of A's that you usually
it's quite
get.
normal, right? When it comes to parenting, like parents will reward like certain rewards to their kids. If they say, oh, if you score like A for this subject, I will buy you something, or I will give you a gift, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's also danger in that, which actually I don't really like this idea of rewarding children for a good effort in their exams already, because at the end of the day, you're just taking away the joy and the pride of achieving something, and there have been research that shows that once you start rewarding things that are already inherently rewarding, you are taking away the power of that act itself, meaning that the next time, if they perform well and they don't get anything, they feel like, okay, now what's the point of me doing this? So they don't do it because of the act itself, but in order to get something else. Yeah, so you're kind of diluting the worth of the act in itself. Yeah, so
how can, let's say parents or people, loved ones that we know, let's say we know people or loved ones that might have the tendency to commit suicide. What is the next stage for us to sort of like prevent this to happen? Like, should we just be there for them, or should we do something more?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you are very, very worried about them, I think you probably need professional help at this point in time. Seek a counselor, a clinical psychologist, even a psychiatrist, in order to help these people. I mean, there are a lot of avenues out there. There are the befrienders. There's so many different organizations that actually are able to help people in depression. Yeah. So, my advice is seek professional help when you need. I think there's this thing about us Asians that's not so used to going to see a counselor or a psychologist, because they often associate it with mental illness.
Yeah.
That I only go see a psychologist if I'm crazy. So if I'm not, I remember when I was doing my internship once in a hospital, and people do like MCs, right? They always try, but patients in a psychiatric ward will prefer if you don't give them MCs, because there's this stigma associated with seeking treatment. Yeah, and this, I think, is a very, very bad mindset that people have, because it prevents people from seeking help when you need it, right? So I mean, we're not ashamed to go and see a doctor if you have a cough or a cold, right? Nobody would be like, I'm not telling anybody because it's so shameful. But then why is it that we're treating things like depression, anxiety with shame, as if there's anything wrong with being depressed?
I think partly it's also because in our society, like, you need to show the best side of you. Like, you need to show that you are successful, achieving something, you're always happy, instead of trying to show like, you're just a human being. You are prone to depression, you're prone to anxiety, and all these different emotions that people would deem negative. So in that sense, I don't know whether I mean, this is just my understanding of today's modern society. It seems like there's no room for people to sort of like pour out their dark emotions, rather,
Yeah.
especially in public. You know, it's like it seems you would be deemed as someone that is, I say, something wrong with you.
Yeah, this is where it's strange, right? Nobody sees you any less if you get sick, right? In fact, people will be very, very sympathetic, right? Okay, it's all right, take a rest and things. But when it comes to mental issues, people get depression. Then all of a sudden, people don't see you as they see you as weak. They see you as like, come on, get over it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't tell someone who's sick to just get over it, heal yourself, Yeah, so I think there's a great difference on how people view physical illness and also mental issues. But at the end of the day, it's basically the same thing, Yeah, so I think there's a lot of, readjusting the mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it also true that like people who are prone to suicidal thoughts is people who tend to keep to themselves when it comes to like their dark emotions or emotions that or issues that they don't want, they think that people would see them as being weak if they share it to other people?
Well, we have this thing called rumination. This is one of the factors that could lead someone to depression, where they focus on negative thoughts and it keeps on repeating in their head again and again and again. And like we said, probably because they don't have an outlet, they can't tell it to someone, or they felt that if I tell it to anyone, it'd be too shameful. It shows how incompetent I am. Yeah, so they keep it within themselves and they ruminate, and it goes, in their head again and again. Yeah, so after a while, you begin to believe all those negative thoughts. And not only that, sometimes you magnify the thoughts. You from a small problem, like for example, all right, I just failed one of my papers. And then, and that failure becomes a thought in your head that goes something like, I'm so useless. I studied so hard, but yet I fail. And then it gets more and more, okay, if I fail, no one will love me anymore because my parents put so much hope on me, they spend so much money on me. And this sort of thoughts will keep on playing in their head. And at the end of the day, from a small little issue of failing one single paper when they have passed everything else becomes such a big problem to them. So thoughts are very, very important. And that's what we psychologists try to do, is to change all those negative thoughts into positive ones by challenging them, because some of those thoughts are not really true. Just because I failed one paper doesn't make me a useless child to my parents. But sometimes it could be like that. Once you're in this negative mood, suddenly everything, seems, all the lights seems to shut off and you feel that there's just no hope anymore. Yeah.
So what kind of professional help that professional psychologists would provide or psychiatrists would provide to the patient?
Well, psychologists and psychiatrists work from a very different from a different perspective. Psychologists focus more on the cognitive issues, the way we think, stuff like that, whereas a psychiatrist, it's more from a medical point of view. And both of these are very, very useful in different situations. There are some cases where even counseling will not help a person if, let's say, there are certain biological imbalances in the brain, things to do with their neurotransmitter, hormone imbalances, and these people tend to become depressed even when there's nothing to be said about. So in those serious cases, we just cannot afford to wait for the counselor to talk and change their thoughts. You need instant sort of remedy, and in certain cases medication may be necessary. I mean, of course, I come across patients who they just can't think of anything positive in their life, no matter how much you try to show them, hey, there's a way out. And for these people, sometimes they need medication in order to alleviate this feeling of hopelessness in them before you can even, conduct any proper counseling with them.
Is this feeling rooted in childhood?
Yes, there are many, many different ways of having this negative thought, but childhood is one main one. Psychologists talk about what we call schema. It's what we how we see the world. And of course, when we are born, we are kind of like a blank slate, right? And as we grow up, the values that society places on us, our parents place on us, that will form a certain schema for us. So let's say if I grew up in a family where achievement is very, very important. When I see my brothers get rewarded because he achieved, my sister gets rewarded because she's achieved. So the schema that I form for myself would go something like, I am only worthy of something, or I'm somebody if I'm able to achieve something. So if at any time in their life when they do not achieve something or they fail in something, then this schema starts playing. Because I have not achieved, therefore I'm unworthy of my parents' love. Things like that. So yes, a childhood could be one of the things. But of course, as we grow up, there are a lot of different influences that come in as well. We learn about ourselves, we learn to value ourselves irrespective of what people say, our friends encourages us. So these things become very, very important as well.
I guess in a way that forming close-knitted communities or friendship with people who we really care and those who really care about us as well.
Positive. Very important.
Will increase the positivity of a person.
Yes, definitely. You hang around with negative people, you will, absorb that negative vibe and you will feel bad about yourself, right?
I see. But what if the person has no way out? Like they are caught in a situation where they are in a family that is negative, they're in a society that do not see themselves as someone that is hopeful to society, or they just being seen as someone that is hopeless. How can they get a way out for this?
Yeah, I suppose one of the things that we're always trying to tell our clients, patients, is that yes, you cannot control what people think of you. This is something that no matter how hard you try, you cannot change people. So yes, my parents, if that's how they think of me, that I will only be a good daughter or son if I achieve something, I can't change the way they think. But how you respond to them, that one is still beyond your control, right? So at the end of the day, if nobody loves you, but can't you at least love yourself? And that's something that, and come on, don't tell me that you're such a terrible person that everybody around you hates you. And if that's the case, then probably the problem is with you yourself. You might have some behavioral characteristics that make yourself unlikable, right? So we try to change that sort of things, change the way they think about themselves, and perhaps even change the way they behave that make people stay away from them, or say negative things about them. Yeah.
But what about the stress coming from our education system? Like, you cannot change the education system, especially for young people. Like, how do they cope with the stress, the enormous stress to perform, while still, keep themselves sane without killing themselves?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of this is where I think we kind of still fall short, of course. Parents are right in the sense that, it's very hard to get a job nowadays with just a basic SPM, or O levels or whatever, exam that you might be in different countries. So yes, parents only want the best for their children. But I think that the emphasis of education shouldn't just be on numbers and grades and alphabets and stuff like that, but it should be more holistic. I like the way how some of the schools in the Philippines, they encourage the students who are talented in certain things. We don't see here in Malaysia. Like, for example, if I'm really good in singing, right, the school doesn't have a syllabus, but it will encourage these children to take up singing and to develop that skills within the school setting itself. Our parents have to send us to piano classes, have to send us for all sorts of different classes outside of school. So why can't it be done within the education system itself, and they get supported by it? So at least the children who are not so academically inclined still feel there is a need for me in school. I love going to school because although I'm not good at this, but I could show that I'm good at something else, right? So it's not only music, sports, so many other things that could be incorporated within the education system itself.
We will return back shortly with more insight on the rising suicide rate.
Voice of sharing. 旅人的香。
Hi, we are returning back from a break just now. So, Alex, about our today's topic, rising suicide rate. Is there a difference between suicide rate among people of different religion and race?
Yeah, definitely, I think. Because this is very obvious, I remember there was during the tsunami incident, that was, I think, in the Aceh tsunami 2004, if I'm
Yeah,
mistaken, in
2004.
December, right? Yeah, so a few of my colleagues were actually sent to different countries to do some psychological first aid with different victims and survivors. And what's very interesting is they do notice that because remember, if Aceh was hit the worst, and of course there are other parts of the world that was also hit, like for example Sri Lanka was also hit, and they found
And a part of Maldives.
yes,
as well.
and a part of Maldives itself, and they found that the suicide rate after the incident was much higher in Sri Lanka compared to Aceh. If you think about it, Sri Lanka didn't had it that bad. Aceh had it worse. So why is it that the suicide rate in Aceh is so much lower? In fact, almost negligible lah. And one of the reasons that they think is because of religion, because certain religion prohibits suicide. Like for example, in Islam, it said that if you commit suicide, the method of your suicide will be how you will suffer in hell later on. Yeah, so this serves as a deterrent for certain people, to commit suicide. And of course, it's also like how they view life in itself, the meaning of life, or of their own lives. So, like for example, in certain religion, if you believe in God and that God is supreme over everything, and therefore, He's responsible for anything that happens to you. There's a reason, right?
So it's easier for people who has a strong religious grip to actually move on.
And to accept that, this bad thing has a reason. So if they can find meaning in their suffering, it's easier for them to actually handle it than just senseless suffering. I don't know why all this thing is happening to me. So for people who cannot find meaning in whatever difficulty that they're facing, it's a bit harder to cope.
I see. What about different races in the context of Malaysia, for example?
Again, it's very hard to say because if you look at the statistics, it doesn't tell you much. Yes, there is a lower incidence among certain races, but it could also mean that they just do not want to report it as much because the taboo is much stronger. Like I said, among Muslims, the taboo is much greater, right? So even let's say if it was actually a suicide, but then most of the time the parents will say, please do not write it down as suicide because they're going to have problems with burying the person. So they rather put it as, unspecified incident or whatever it is, but anything else besides suicide. Yeah, so based on the statistics itself, it's very difficult for us to actually see the actual scenario on what's actually going on.
And interestingly, like in terms of the cases of suicide, there are some suicide where people actually plan, to kill themselves. Like I want to kill myself after this event or by this end of the year. But there are some people who actually are there because they are actually crying out for help. They are seeking help, but no one is helping them. So ended up they just kill themselves. How do you see in these different reasons of people killing themselves?
I mean, like accidental. Yeah, I've heard of sort of accidents. Actually they don't really intend to die, but it's just because nobody pays attention to them. So
maybe overdose of
correct,
sleeping pills or something.
Just to get people to notice them. Yes, it happens as well. And I think a lot of the suicide cases that you see in the hospital, sometimes it's not. They don't really intend to die. But, just to get their husband's attention who has been neglecting them. So they use all these tricks. So it's a very, very tough job for a psychologist to differentiate between which are the groups of people that are really committed to dying and those who are just crying out for help. Because the thing is, if you pay attention to people who are just crying out for attention in this way, you're kind of reinforcing their behavior. So the next time they're not noticed, they will try the same tactics again. But at the same time, we can't say that, oh no, I don't think you're going to do it, because they might actually, so we don't really know. But generally, the rule of thumb is that usually people who are serious about killing themselves don't usually tell people. Again, this is not always true, because they don't want people to know. But if I blow my horns 10 times and tell everybody that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, probably they won't lah,
Yeah.
But then again, I have to say that this is not always the case, because sometimes, there are people who have revealed certain intentions and they actually went ahead and
Like
do it.
certain cult groups, happened in the past.
Yeah, but that's very rare situation.
Yeah, very, very rare.
We're talking about the normal
Yeah.
people in daily
But
life.
there are some people who are actually attention seeker. They don't really intend to kill themselves, but they just want to hurt themselves so that
Yeah.
people would sort of like give certain attention to them.
People with borderline personality disorder does that a lot. They have cutting behaviors just to get people's attention. Yeah. So what people with borderline personality disorder is like, is that they kind of sometimes sabotage their own relationship. So at one moment they'll be like so close to you, you're their best friend, their hero and everything. And after a while, because of one slight, maybe you just didn't answer their phone call one time, and they'll then it goes over to the other end where you are the worst person, you are so uncaring, and after a while they'll try to get back, and once people ignore them because it's just so tiring, sometimes they will try to use all these tactics like, okay, all right, if you don't answer me, I'm going to hang myself, okay, I'm going to drink paraquat or something, just to make people pay attention to them.
And they will always let the person know that they are doing it.
Yes, they will tell it first. They'll send you SMSs, they'll call you, and they'll threat, so that people will take notice of them. So yes, true, there are certain people who will actually do that.
And there's a lot of cases of, with Facebook and all, like what I said earlier in this conversation is, there are a lot of people who, when they have intention to commit suicide, they would actually write it down in Facebook that, they don't see life has meaning anymore and they want to end their life. Is that the last ever call for help?
I suppose so. Otherwise, there's no reason why they would want to actually let people know, right? And the worst part is there's some people who, don't respond in an appropriate way, and there are people who even age them to, okay, go ahead, stuff like that, and that doesn't help very, very much.
So, lastly, for people who are prone to suicide, what is your advice to people around them? How do we detect these people, and how can we provide a better sort of environment for these people to not to be suicidal?
Yeah, I always tell people that at the end of the day, no matter how bad your problem is, there's always a way out. And one thing that you will always have to keep in mind is that your feelings, it goes up and down. And we all know that. We have moods swing. So one time you might feel as if life is not meaningful anymore, but trust me, you will not always feel like this. There were times where you feel that that's it, there's no way out. But you know that this mood is not going to last forever. Just like, any weather doesn't last forever. So there'll be ups and downs. So the thing is, if you think, I'm going to end my life now, you wait for another 3 hours, you might not think that anymore. And you have just committed, sometimes an act which is irreversible. Yeah, so always wait it out, and always talk to somebody. There's hotlines, you can call up somebody. And the thing is, remember that you are always never alone. You think you are, but there are always people that you can reach out. Yeah.
So in a sense, we need to accept all the different emotions that we have and not see this is negative emotion, means it's bad, meaning that I should
negative emotions are good. You can't be happy all the time. That's weird. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's all part of experience in life. And there's no bad incident that cannot be undone. Yeah, so that is definitely not the way out.
True. Anyway, thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Arlene.
It has been a very interesting conversation on suicide rate. Hopefully, this will be a very fruitful sort of way forward for people who are prone to suicidal, or if you know anyone that is prone to suicidal. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.